America is in a big problem. Its world order and economic stability is more fragile than ever. Government debt has continued to pile up in the past few years, due to which the interest repayment amounts now make up a sixth of the annual budget. The rising cases of large-scale drug trafficking and overdoses show no signs of slowing down. It seems that the trust America spent generations building is now eroding steadily by tariffs, unpredictable policies, and a growing belief that the rules no longer matter. As John Emmerich Acton once said, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This lesson isn't only about one leader. It's about what happens when an empire starts believing it's untouchable, even when its foundations are already cracking. And right now, America is standing at a crossroads with no way to return back. But can America save its world order? Or are we already seeing the start of a new global empire? The truth is deeper than most people can realize. For almost 100 years, the US has been the most powerful country in the world. With just 4% of the global population, it generates 20% of the world's income and makes up nearly 40% of all military spending. So in the 1990s, when America was celebrating the fall of the Soviet Union, the idea that its empire might collapse would have seemed like a joke. The US dollar quickly became the backbone of the global economy. By 1995, it accounted for 71% of global foreign exchange reserves, making America the center of world finance. At the same time, capitalism and democracy spread worldwide, even in countries that had been fierce opponents, like Russia, Poland, and Vietnam. Back then, America had never been more stronger. But while the US was enjoying its victory, another nation across the Pacific was quietly preparing for its own rise: China. In the 1990s, China began transforming its economy, setting itself on a path that would reshape global power. China's economy was growing more than 9% every year, lifting millions out of poverty. Instead of worrying, American leaders celebrated this, believing China was adopting free markets and would eventually embrace democracy too. When China joined the World Trade Organization in year 2000, President Bill Clinton called it a turning point, claiming China was accepting not just trade, but the values of economic freedom.
China has steadfastly shouldered its responsibilities, helping to prevent another cycle of dangerous devaluations. We must continue to work together.
The fact that China remained an authoritarian one-party state was brushed aside as something temporary. From the US perspective, China looked like proof that capitalism had finally taken over the country. But instead of being absorbed into America's system, China was slowly reshaping its own role in the world. Between 1990 and 2020, China's manufacturing output grew 50 times, from $100 billion to $1.5 trillion, turning it into the world's factory. American consumers eagerly embraced this shift, and today, 97% of US laptops, 78% of smartphones, and most toys and sporting goods come from China. On the surface, this meant cheap products for Americans, but it also created heavy dependence on China. At the same time, US debt skyrocketed. Consumer debt nearly tripled from $1.8 trillion in the year 2000 to over $5 trillion by 2020. The federal government also sank deeper into debt, reaching $36 trillion by 2024. Projections show that by 2034, it could reach $54 trillion, about $150,000 of debt per citizen. This isn't just a money problem, it's a classic sign of empire decline. Before we continue, if you are liking this video, then make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell for our next interesting video coming soon. So, let's continue. History shows us that great powers, from the Dutch to the British, follow a similar pattern: massive debt, inequality, and dependence on imports until their dominance collapses completely. Today, the US faces the same situation. Meanwhile, China is following the opposite path, saving more, investing more, and planning for the long term. In America, 70% of GDP comes from consumption. In China, it's only 39%. This difference has allowed China to build huge cash reserves, which it uses to invest in infrastructure, technology, and global projects. The Belt and Road Initiative, launched in 2013, is China's blueprint for a new world order. They've spent over $1.3 trillion building roads, ports, and power plants across 150 countries, covering 75% of the global population. In Africa alone, China has built thousands of kilometers of roads, ports, and power facilities, far more than what the US has achieved in decades. While America spent trillions fighting wars in places like Iraq, China was building partnerships and infrastructure. The US tried to reshape nations in its own rules, while China instead worked with countries as they were, quietly expanding its influence without firing a shot. This contrast is reshaping global politics. In 2023, for the first time, China's approval rating in Africa surpassed that of the US, which clearly shows that America's international standing is slipping, while China's is rising. But that's not all. Back in home, another crisis was brewing up slowly: deindustrialization. In the 1960s, 30% of Americans worked in manufacturing. By 2020, it was just 8%. Entire industries moved overseas, especially to China, hollowing out the backbone of the American middle class. Stable, well-paying jobs vanished, replaced by an economy that mainly rewarded tech, finance, and capital. Yes, the US economy has grown overall since the 1980s, but most of that growth went to the wealthiest. Today, the top 1% owns more than 30% of the country's wealth. For ordinary Americans, wages have been stagnant for decades, while housing prices have exploded by more than 500% since the 1980s. The American dream feels out of reach for many. And because of these, by 2024, frustration amongst the people boiled over. Donald Trump won a landslide election, promising to restore America's glory with tariffs, taxes on imports meant to bring manufacturing back home. On paper, tariffs seemed like a clever fix, but within 10 days, most were scrapped. Why? Because the global system that America itself had built depends on free trade. The sudden shift towards tariffs and taxes spooked the investors and threatened to trigger a financial crisis. This was more than a failed policy. It was a warning sign. History shows that declining empires often make desperate, short-term moves when their dominance slips, just as Rome and Britain once did. America's retreat from globalization wasn't just a strategy, it was panic. So where does this leave the American world order? After decades of dominance, cracks are now clear. Massive debt, inequality, and decline at home, while China steadily invests for the future. The contrast couldn't be sharper. An America weighed down by debt and short-term thinking versus a China focused on long-term growth and global influence. As the US struggles, it looks more and more likely that the Chinese century isn't just possible, it may be inevitable. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for our next interesting video coming soon. This is Jimmy, and you are watching Beyond Economy.